everyone, and welcome back to Sharon Cullen Art. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about gouache. I'm going to tell you everything that I know about gouache, everything that I've learned about gouache in my study of gouache, and some of this information may be coming as quite a shock to many of you. First of all, gouache is often referred to, and this is like one of those cringy things for me, a pet peeve of mine, that it's often referred to as the opaque watercolor. I'm going to tell you why that is not true. The only similarities to gouache and watercolor are its usability, and even there are major differences. With gouache, it is totally water soluble, meaning you can lay it down, clean your brushes and everything with only water. And it is generally reconstitutable. But that's not the case always with watercolor because, as you know, there are many staining colors. There are colors that sit on the surface of the paper, colors that penetrate the layers of the paper, which is what causes them to become staining. They're primarily transparent rather than opaque. There are very few watercolors that are solely opaque. Then they start to fall into a gouache sort of category. And I think the majority of watercolorists out there avoid those colors because they're into watercolor for its transparency. Gouache, on the other hand, first of all, has a higher pigment ratio to it than watercolor does, which I didn't realize until I started researching. It's a very, very concentrated color, and it has a higher pigment load than watercolors do. So the same tube of watercolor will have less pigment in it than its counterpart in gouache. Now, another fact about that is what makes gouache opaque. Everyone thinks it's the binder that makes the gouache opaque. That is not the case. It's the size of the pigment particle that is what makes it opaque. The finer the pigment particle, the more light can pass through it and the more transparent it becomes. That's why your quinacridone colors can be so pretty. They have very, very fine particles. They penetrate the paper, they stain the paper, and they refract light back out. But with gouache, people often think it's the binder. Now, the binder used in gouache is the same as the binder used in watercolor, gum arabic, for the most part. Some use different binders now, but most are gum arabic and other additives that they may add to it. Your cheap gouache that you can get cheaply on the market in the stores may contain chalk. That is not a good gouache, and you're going to be unhappy with its ability to do what you want. You're going to get smearing and stripes in your work, and you're going to have trouble keeping a consistent layer because of its chalkiness. So you want to avoid those. You're paying for chalk, white chalk basically, and that's a shame. You're better off buying one set of 6 M-gram colors, their primary set of 6 colors, than you are to buy a set of 30 colors for half that price, because you're going to use much less of it. A tube of M-gram gouache will last you probably, 4 times, if not more, longer than, that was bad grammar, it will last you 4 times longer or more than your cheap gouache that you buy in your local craft store. Another fact that is very interesting about gouache is that you can work from dark to light, or you can work from light to dark. It doesn't matter. Both ways work. I was mentioning that in my video. I like to mix it up a bit. I do both. I zip all over my page when I'm painting. When I did this bridge the other day, I was zipping all over from, I started with the sky, then I did some of the trees, then I went down to the stones, then the water, then back to the trees, back to the bridge. I was going back and forth over and over and over again until I got it finished. And because of its opacity, you can do that and you can get away with it. You just have to know how to work with the gouache in order to get that that system down, basically. Another thing with gouache is the way the color dries. And many of you may have heard that with gouache, it dries darker. That's partially true. Your lighter colors will dry darker. Your darker colors are going to dry lighter. So once you have figured out that little bit of a learning curve, it'll be much easier for you to work with it. I was listening to some YouTube videos this morning, and it was surprising to me some of the things that I heard. And one of the things that I heard was that gouache can only be used for small paintings, and it has to be worked with very quickly because it dries so fast, and that it is like acrylic. Well, and she was talking about water-soluble gouache. Well, acrylic is a water-based. It has a water base in the fact that you can add water to it and thin it out and that kind of thing. But once it dries, it's permanent. With regular gouache, that is not the case unless you buy acryl gouache. And acryl gouache is an acrylic-based gouache. Basically, it's like acrylic paint with a matte finish is pretty much what it is. And it can be mixed well with water. And it tolerates a higher water use than regular acrylic does. But you don't have to work fast with gouache, and you can make large paintings with gouache if that's what you'd like to do. There are many artists out there that work with gouache, and they'll make paintings as large as, 36 inches, There's no reason that you have to work fast with gouache, but I'm wondering if the reason she said this, and she didn't specify, is because your paint dries to a different color. It's hard to match that color after it's dried. If you want to go back and match the color, it will be harder. But what you can do is mix a little paint and let it dry on a piece of paper, or dry it quickly with your dryer or whatever to see what it's going to dry to. Or make a large puddle on your palette, knowing you're going to come back to it, and then just reconstitute it with a little bit of water. And it'll reconstitute itself and you can use it again. But you don't have to work fast in gouache at all. So if you've heard that, that's not the case. You've got plenty of working time. And if it's starting to dry a little bit, you just wet your brush a little bit. That's all there is to it. But I thought that was very interesting. But I do like the fact that you can work light to dark or dark to light. There are also no special gouache brushes. I've been asked over and over again, what kind of brushes do you use? You just use a watercolor brush. The only difference is that many people who use sable or squirrel brushes might like to go with a more synthetic brush for painting with because of its stiff spring that you get with that brush. Now, this is one of my favorite gouache brushes. It's just a small cat's tongue number 6 by Princeton. It's a Princeton Heritage brush, and I love this brush because it comes to a point like a round, yet it's flat like a flat. And I really like that. My brush is still dirty here. I use that brush a lot, but I do still use my sables and my squirrel brushes. And I bought this 1/4 inch silver black velvet just for that purpose, and I never used it the other day like I was planning to. So you use whatever feels good, but I think part of the reason some like synthetics is because they want the stiffness in the brush because of the stiffness of the paint itself. It's a little stiffer to work with. You're using less water when you work with it than you would in watercolor. So that's another reason people will use those. The next thing I wanted to tell you is that gouache really, and this is going back to the drying fast and you got to work fast thing. Gouache stays workable forever. It will always stay workable. So when you're framing it, most people will frame it under glass, because if water splashes on it, then you're going to have a problem and it will dribble paint down your painting, and that would be horrible. But I use something called Dorland's Wax Medium. Let me grab it. It just looks like regular household wax. It smells like household wax. And you just take it on your finger and you smear it on here just like this. That's all you do. And it is not taking my paint up. There's no paint on my finger. So I just go around and I put this on here, and that is going to make my gouache no longer workable. That means it is there forever. It is there for the duration. It is not going to be liftable. I can never go back and change this painting now. Now that it's finished, it's going to stay that way. So I just rub this all over my painting. I got a little much on here. I'm going to spread it out a little bit. And that's all you have to do. And you notice I'm not lifting my paint up. People worry about that. Well, isn't it going to lift the paint because it's water soluble? Yeah, but this wax is like magic. This wax is not household wax though. So just so you're aware, I am not using a household wax at all on this. I'm just going to smear this all over and work it all in here. And then you just let it dry a few minutes, and that's all there is to it. Now, it will stay kind of looking matte, but to me, it gives it kind of a shiny finish. It looks more like an oil painting to me when I use the wax medium over it. But I really love that about it. And I like to cover them with the wax just because the gouache is so reconstitutable. Once this dries, I will show you. I will take a watercolor brush to it and show you that nothing is going to lift. But it says right on here, it's a translucent compound of waxes and resin to be mixed with oil paint, powdered pigments, powdered metals, colored sands, dyes, and other compatible lines of art materials. Excellent for encaustic painting, hot or cold wax painting, and mixed media, and as a protective coating for paintings, wood, plastic, metal objects, or photos. Unexcelled as a protective and permanent sealing medium, resists cracking and dries more quickly than oil paints used by themselves. So you can add this to oil paint. I never knew that. I've only used it for this purpose. That's the whole reason I bought it. It's still a little bit wet here. I can still move the wax around a bit, so I'm going to wait a few more minutes. But if you have color laid down, you'll notice on my paper towel, I had a little bit of lifting, but that was pressing hard on it, and that really didn't take up much color at all. For the most part, you can't even see any change in it. But also, another thing that I wanted to tell you, well, then after that, you don't have to frame this behind glass. You can adhere it to a cradled panel. You can frame it in a frame with a mat without a glass over it, whatever you'd like to do. But this brings me to my next thing that I wanted to tell you. I've got a list here, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to look at my list for a second. I already told you all that. Matching colors once an area is dry can be tricky. Yeah, matching colors once the area is dry can be tricky, so you want to mix plenty ahead of time until you get used to it. You can always, though, if you're close but not perfect, you can blend by adding a little more water to your gouache, and it will lift what's already down, and you can work it that way. and it'll blend together and you won't even notice the difference, which is a really nice factor with gouache. But when you're painting over a previous layer that you don't want to do any blending on, the key to that is that when I start a painting, I start with almost a transparent layer of gouache, very, very fine. You can get away with that on paper, but it is not suggested to do that on something like canvas, because canvas is usually gessoed or whatever, and you're not going to get the... You run the risk of the paint not adhering well or over time falling off or flaking off. But you want to try and keep your paint to water mixture no more than 50-50. But when you're painting and you want to start building your layers up, what I do is I start with a watered down layer. Then my next layer that I put down that I'm working on, I use a little bit less water. And then the next layer, a little bit less. And you keep doing that until you get to the point where you're just using nothing but pigment. That's my way of doing it. Some people use their gouache in a more transparent way all the way across the board. It still gives it a matte finish, and you can still tell it's gouache rather than watercolor. But it just looks different. You can see the difference in it. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little bit about how I work with my gouache. I just want to give you an idea of how I do things. First of all, if I'm starting out, I might take a bigger brush, a wetter brush. I've got my silver black velvet here. It's a size 8. And I'm just going to grab a little bit of my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to smear this on my paper. And this, again, this is just drawing paper, so it may get some warping because I'm going very watered down. So I've got this on my paper, and now I'm going to go ahead with a medium green, and I'm just going to start adding in my tree. Take a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, mixing them together. I'm going to get this bright green, and I'm just going to push in a little bit of a tree. This is just an underpainting, so this is very rough. And then I need a tree trunk. So I've got a mixture here of a Van Dyke Brown and Payne's Gray, very dark mixture. And I'm just going to paint in a rough tree trunk. This is just an elementary kind of a tree. I'm not doing anything huge here. This is just an example to show you how you can work with gouache. And I'll add a branch coming off the side here too. My brush got a little dry. Okay. All right. Now this is already drying, but you can see here how it's already kind of mixed together. This watered down version of gouache has blended and bled together and made these pretty colors. So that's really kind of cool, but we're going to be covering it up. So what I would do next, once this is dry, and you want to wait till each layer is dry before adding another layer to it, unless you want to blend the colors together. And I'm going to show you both ways that I do this. For the tree now, I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab a little bit of my sap green, which I believe is right here. And I'm going to take a little bit of that medium yellow mixture to wet my brush. This is going to be just slightly darker, but it's still watered down, as you can see. It's very watery. And I'm just adding some layering to my painting, getting this color down. Not leaving a whole lot of the underpainting, but just a little bit. Now I'm rushing through this, so this is kind of a sloppy job, but then I'm going to go in with a little darker mixture, a little deeper green, and I can do it while it's still wet. That's fine. I'm barely touching down on the paper, and I don't care if I lift any color off. And I'm just wetting this or tapping this in. I guess I should have brought my sky over to the other side. That would have been nice, huh? Since I put my tree on the side. There we go. So I'm using a brush that's way too small for doing that kind of a painting. There we go. Okay, so I've got that down. And I may want to add a little bit of a grassy area underneath my tree too. And I'm starting that again with a more watered down mixture of my green. Then I'm going to continue on with my darker color here. And you don't need a lot of colors to do this. You know, if you just got the M Graham Basics set, that would be a great place to start. I think you can get all 6 colors, 14 ml tubes, 15 ml tubes, half ounce. You can get 6 for, I think, like $33 on Amazon. I can't even look right now. I guess I can look, but my Amazon account was hacked yesterday. I was so bummed out because I wanted to order an Audible book and I couldn't get into my darn account. And the way I figured it out was when I went to order my Audible book. If you guys have Audible, you'll understand this. It told me I could get 2 free books if I opened an account. And I thought, well, I already have an account. Why isn't it just giving me the price for the book? And it wasn't like an Audible credit like you get every couple months, you know. So I couldn't figure this out. I was like, well, what the heck's going on? So then I tried to purchase it, and it takes me to my login page. And I've got something, Jaden.mmr something or other, something .ru. And I thought, well, what is RU? I was thinking, is that Russia? What is that? I don't know where it was from, but it shocked me, and I was concerned. I was on my way to a doctor's appointment, and I was late. So I was in the waiting room. I had to leave the waiting room to talk to this person who could hardly understand English, and she wasn't listening to me, and I was getting so frustrated. But anyway, the hack, apparently when they hack your accounts, they can't get access to your credit cards or any of that information. They can get, I think they can get demographic information, which is scary enough, but Amazon only uses the last 4 digits of your card on file. So nobody can access that through my account. They could access it through Amazon, I guess, but just like any company. But anyway, it was kind of freaky. So I got an email last night saying, go ahead, log in. You can put a new password in. You're going to have to re-enter your credit card information. And I went in and I did all that and ordered an Audible book. And then it said pending authorization. So I called them back today and they said, oh, it'll be another 24 hours. We're just making sure everything is safe in your account. Blah, blah, blah. So I can't even order anything. I feel like I'm going through withdrawal, you guys. It's awful. You guys know how much I order on Amazon. Holy crap. I order freaking groceries on Amazon. So anyway, now what I'm going to do next is show you an example. Whoops, I'm sorry. Bump in the world here. We're having a earthquake. I'm going to grab some of my yellow, and I'm going to just show you how easy it is to go back in to the paint, but I'm going to wet my brush. So this yellow is watered down, and this is dry. It's almost dry. I'm just going to dry these couple of dots here. There. I'm going to go back in with this yellow, and I can glaze over the top if I want, or I can take that and I can work it in and blend it. So now I'm just blending that all out. Now look, it turned green. See? That's how easy that gouache is to reconstitute. But then if I want to take my yellow and use it full strength, I can do that. And I can put the yellow on my tree branches where the sun's shining and hitting them, so that it looks like light captured on there. I can even soften the yellow if that yellow is too yellow, which I don't think it is on a tree, but I can grab some of my white and mix it with my yellow, and I can soften that yellow down and really make it bright. I think I want to add a little of my medium green to that, though, to green it a little bit. And I can soften it that way. You get a lot of extra color variation. See how easy that is? And it's so much fun. Or I can mix it in again and make it darker. And then it's dark again. Very cool, huh? Now with the tree trunk, let me show you that. Now I've got this dark brown tree trunk, which isn't doing a whole lot of anything, especially if the sun's coming and hitting this tree trunk. So I'm going to take some of my neutral gray here, and I'm just going to water it down just a bit. I'm going to add it to my tree trunk. I probably shouldn't have added it there because the sun isn't going to hit up under those leaves. But we're just playing here. So now that looks really odd, right? Well, I could try and mix it in with this paint on my brush, but it's not going to work very well. I'm going to get all this stuff. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of that brown mixture on a wet brush, and I'm going to go back in with my brown mixture, and I'm going to tone that down with the mixture. Whoops. And I can make a little more here, and I can make it full strength again if it gets too light, or if I need to get rid of the sun on this spot because it's not hitting there. And maybe it's hitting in this spot a little bit. And then I just take a little bit of water and I just blend it out again. See how easy that is to do? So fun to play with. And look at the blending that you get. And then I can go over it with any color I need to go over it with. Let's see, I want to put some grass in. I just take it and put my grass in. No problem. And oops, the sun's hitting my grass in that one spot. So I'm going to take my yellow mixture and I'm going to make the tips of this brighter where the sun is hitting it. Very, very simple. So that's basically how I use the gouache. And the nice thing too is, like when I showed you this bridge, I went in fact, you can still see some pencil lines here where I never even got thick on my gouache. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me see how. Bring it real close and try to get it there. See, that's all pencil lines there. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. You can do it thick, you can do it thin. But just be careful not to be too thin, or then you run the risk of having problems with it. I started doing one the other day, and I didn't finish it. You can tell I really didn't do any of my blending or anything, but I can still work on that and finish it up. Now, the next thing I wanted to tell you about was the gouache itself. And you hear me keep talking about, oh, before I do that, though, I wanted to show you another technique. That's where I was getting to with this. Whoops. That was take one, and I messed something up. I'm going to grab this brush, and it's barely wet. And I'm just going to take some, I'll just take some yellow here and kind of wipe it around on my palette a bit. And then I'm going to go over this. You can do dry brushing technique real easily. Let me try dry brushing into the sky here. I'll take a little bit of my magenta. This is quinacridone magenta, which is drying a little bit. I need to wet it. It's a color I don't use as often. But you can just dry brush with this so easily. I don't have enough on here. Dry brushing techniques are so easy to do with this because gouache is a drier medium than watercolor. You don't require a lot of water to get the effect from it. So right now it's too wet, but as it dries, you can see me getting a dry brush effect, which is really cool. You can use that on your tree trunks if you want to put bark on a tree trunk. Let me do it with gray. I was going to do it with black, but it'll be hard for you to see. Hope that's not too wet. See? I can put my bark on it just by doing that. Very simple. It's really cool. So dry brushing is fun to do with this too. Now, what I was going to talk to you about next is the gouache itself. I talked to you about different companies of gouache and buying cheap gouache versus good gouache. Now, some facts that I was not even aware of. I have gouache like crazy. I have all of these gouaches here, which are M-Gram, Holbein, Winsor & Newton. There's more Holbein. I've got a whole box of Holbein over here that's almost full of Holbein's starter set. There's a few out of it, but I used that a lot when I was traveling before. And then I was just using this as my actual palette. But you can do whatever you want. Anyway, what I wanted to show you was the light fastness information on this. M-Gram has the best light fastness ratio out of any gouache out there. Now, some people will try to tell you that your gouache is not light fast. You don't want to frame a gouache painting because it's just going to fade anyway. They call it designer's gouache because initially it was made for designing. So like designing illustrations, or designers used it for like fashion design, etc. That's what they would paint with. It was quick, it dried quick, it was easy to use, all of that. So they called it designer's gouache rather than poster paint or tempera paint or something like that. Designer does not mean artist gouache. Now, M-Gram's gouache is artist gouache. And they don't call it designer, they just call it artist's gouache. The light fast ratings on M-Gram's gouache is amazing. Amazing. They also have a honey base in their binders, so their colors tend to stay moist longer on the palette than colors like Winsor & Newton or Holbein or Lucas or some of the other colors. But the information I wanted to tell you, and people always think Winsor & Newton is the way to go, especially people in Europe. That's what they can get their hands on. Winsor & Newton is probably one of the worst artist quality gouaches out there. Holbein has a palette of 89 colors in their spectrum of colors. Only 32 of them have a 3-star light fastness or high permanence rating, which gives it 64% with excellent light fastness. The rest are below that, either good or poor, fair or poor. So 64% of Holbein's colors have an excellent light fast rating. Then I go to Winsor & Newton. They have 82 colors. Holbein had 89, 32 of them were high light fastness. Winsor & Newton has 82 colors. Only 15 have an excellent light fast rating. 15. They have something like 4 or 5 that are not yet rated, so I'll give them that. Maybe those will be better in light fastness, but according to the way their chart looks, it's not going very well for them. 15 of them have an excellent light fastness. That is 18% of their colors have an excellent light fast rating. I was shocked by this. I have a ton of Winsor & Newton colors. All of my greens are Winsor & Newton, except for my sap. I bought M. Graham sap. And I was shocked at that. I have tons of Winsor & Newton. This one has a light fast rating of A, I believe, which is good. No, this is AA permanence. So that's a permanent color. I try to stick with permanent colors, but here's this linden green, which I love. Only has a light fast permanence of A, which is good. Their neutral gray, A, which is good. Not excellent, but good. And, you know, it goes on from there. This one is A. Here's a B. But if you go with M. Graham, they only have 35 colors in their color range, which is what bums me out about M. Graham. I'm hoping that they will increase this color range very soon because gouache is sort of taking off, but they only have 35 colors. But of those 35, 31 have excellent light fast ratings. That is 88% of their colors have excellent light fastness compared to 18% on Winsor & Newton and 64% on Holbein. Now, I haven't gotten to Lucas. I'm going to do that right now, so I will pause the video and I'm going to come back and give you the information on Lucas. On the Lucas Studio Gouache, they have 30 colors. Of those 30, 20 of them have excellent light fastness, which is a 66% ratio, which is still better than Winsor & Newton. So, if you want to get a good gouache, I would tend to stay away from Winsor & Newton. Or make sure you look at the light fast ratings for each color that you buy. In all of these, they're set like watercolor so that you can see their light fastness rating. Like this is 3, this is 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. There's none of them that have 1. So they're either good or excellent for the Lucas Studio Gouache, which is really, really good for an inexpensive gouache. And I think you can get that at Jerry's Artorama. I actually have that gouache. It is a little bit less in quality, though. So I just wanted you to be aware of all of that. If you're going to start out with gouache and you want to buy a good artist quality gouache, I would go with M. Graham if you're in the U.S. It's inexpensive. You can buy a set of 6 tubes from M. Graham for about $30 to $35 on Amazon. I would get their primaries set, which gives you some reds, some yellows, some blues, and I think a black and white or something like that. Make sure that you get white gouache, though. You'll need white, Black isn't bad to have. Some people don't like black. They think it's too harsh. One of the companies, I believe it is M. Graham, makes a Payne's Gray. Yes, it's M. Graham that makes it. I just ran out the Payne's Gray, which is really good. Now, the neutral gray that I get, I believe, is by Winsor & Newton. Just look at the colors before you purchase them. I'll still use Winsor & Newton, but I tell you what, I'm going to get away from using these greens that I've bought. They're sap green. I won't buy anymore. I do like the olive green, and I can only get it in Winsor & Newton, and it has a good rating. It's not excellent, but it's good. So if I can't get the olive green color I want, then I'll just start using sap and adding just a touch of burnt sienna to it to give myself an olive green. And it might be a more true olive green anyway. But anyhow, the reason I bounce around from manufacturer to manufacturer is because I like to have a nice set of gouache. And now I've got a set of, well, this holds 24 colors. These are the 24 that I use most often. I do have other colors as well from Holbein and from Lucas. Leave me questions below if you have any questions regarding that. You can always, if you have gouache sitting out on a palette like this, let's say you squirted your tube and you didn't use it up, don't worry, it's not wasted. You just add a little bit of water and stir this up and you've got your gouache again. It's completely reconstituted. Just that easy. So don't worry about it. Use that gouache up. I also have used them in a regular watercolor palette and allowed them to dry. The thing is you want to make sure that you spray them down about 5 to 10 minutes before you begin using them so that they soften back up again. I add a nice little puddle in the bottom of them. I'm going to grab my palette to show you exactly how much water I put in. Okay. These colors have been sitting for months, and as you can see, they're pretty cracked. So what I would do is just add a huge puddle of water in each one. Just fill it up with a nice little pond, because these are really dry. You could use them right away. In fact, this needs to be moved because this yellow got on the wrong side. And this yellow is already softened. Not the darker one, but the lighter one. Just that quick. It softened. Look at how soft it got on me already. See? It's already soft. But what I would do is I would take my end of my brush and just kind of chunk it up and make it back into a paste. So don't think that your gouache is ruined when it dries like that. Really let it soak. Now that one's staying pretty dry, so is this one. They need time. My white will stay dry for a long time. That really needs to work. Some of my browns will probably reconstitute quickly, like this one. It's already reconstituting. But you can just let them sit. Give them about 5-10 minutes. And then go back and work with them. And they will be absolutely perfect. So don't worry about it if they're dry like that. I'm just going to let them sit. I also wanted to show you, I do have the Caran d'Ache gouache. I'm having trouble with my thumb still. I can't use it very well. And these come in cakes. And you really don't even need to reconstitute these because they're such strong pigment. But I can just take my brush over it, and it's already blue, and put that in my tree. See how strong that paint is? So that's another option if you want to have a palette like that. You can spray them down, but it's really not necessary. And they put their white separately. I don't really care for their white as much as the M. Graham. I love the M. Graham. And I'm going to look really quick and see what the Caran d'Ache lightfast rating is. And I also wanted to show you that I had some really cheap gouache that I couldn't really paint with very well. This has probably got chalk in it. This was some sort of Oh, this is Royal and Langnickel. I'm going to have to look into that. But I did have the Lucas gouache. And I'm going to go back and try using that because of the lightfast ratings are pretty good. They're higher quality than I thought. So you can always give this a try. But I found that it was a little more smeary than some of my better gouaches, which is why I went to the better stuff. So let me go ahead and look up the lightfast ratings for Caran d'Ache real quick. Well, unfortunately, after searching, I cannot find the color chart or the light fastness chart for these colors. All I can find is that they claim excellent light fastness. So that's all I can say about that. I've heard other people really enjoy this, but the person that I know that uses this often, he uses it more in sketchbooks and then goes to his studio and paints in oil paint. So this doesn't tell me much of anything. Gouache and cakes, brilliant colors, economical in use, 8 of 15 colors, available individually or in sets. That's all it says. So anyway, they say excellent light fastness. And my cure for this palette, wondering what I would mix with when I'm out in the field, I figured I would use this old plastic mixing tray. It's got a lot of good mixing areas, and it's very lightweight, probably about an ounce. And I can carry it with my set, and it'll be fine. I could even put a rubber band around it, but I don't think it's necessary. So that's what I'd use in the field. Now, it's been about 3 minutes on this, and I want to check this and see how we're doing on the softening of the gouache. Like I said, it's only been 3 minutes, so, and this has been months and months without using it. This yellow is softening up. I can chip away at it a little more, but it's still got a ways to go. This red is really getting mushy now. So you can see, and you can also use the puddle while it's sitting, you know, because I mean, look at that, how opaque that was, just wiping it off. This brown keeps soaking up all the water, and look at how soft it got. It got a lot softer. I can mix this up now. It was totally hard before, so it's getting there. It's getting there, but it has a ways to go. The greens are going to take a while usually, this one especially, the chromium. And this is my olive. It's starting to soften, but it's got a ways to go. These here have a ways to go, I can tell. And of course this magenta, this one's always very hard. It dries quickly. But I'm going to just let those go, and I will show you at the end of the video here how long it took before they were reconstituted completely. Some other information that I wanted to give you regarding gouache is if you're working with gouache, well, indoors or outdoors, you'll want to spray your gouache frequently with water, because the top of your little squeeze out of your tube is going to dry very quickly, and especially outside. I love using gouache for plein air painting. I think it's so much fun to use out in the field, but on a sunny day or on a windy day, which are quite often, you're going to have your gouache drying out. Now, I live in a humid state. I'm surrounded by water. I live on a peninsula, so it's very humid in this state, especially in the summer. So I don't have to do it quite as often, but if you're living in an arid state like Arizona or something like that, you're going to have to do that a lot more frequently. So just make sure that you take a spray bottle with you and spray a little water over it every few minutes, just a couple squirts to keep the top moist. You don't need to put puddles in it like I showed you on that other palette. And if you do prefer the look of watered down gouache like this, then you got to be careful about your mixing. You don't want to mix more than a 50-50 ratio of water to paint. If you get over that 50-50 and you're doing 60-50, 60-50, 60-40, 70-30 water to gouache, then you can run the risk of flaking the paint off or the paint not adhering to your substrate over time. But a way to get around that is, if you do like it to be a little more transparent and you want to use it in a more thin way, get a little bottle of gum arabic. It's very inexpensive. I bought mine online, probably either on a website, on a like Dick Blick, or on Amazon. I just got the Winsor & Newton gum arabic. I've had this for years and I've hardly used any. Sometimes I will use it to dip my brushes in that I'm not using so that I can keep their fuzzies under control. And you can just dip your brush right in there and then shape your brush and let it dry and it will harden. Then when you want to reuse it, you want to put it in water. But you can take a few drops of this and add it, mix it into your gouache, and you can use it thinner than you would normally use it. And you won't have to worry about what's going to happen to it over time, especially if you're using it on a canvas or something like that. There's also something called acrylic gouache, or acryl gouache, which is an acrylic-based gouache. It has different binder in it. It's got an acrylic binder. It still works and paints like gouache, but it dries like acrylic, only it's matte like gouache. It won't reconstitute after it's dried. Some people like to use that underneath on their first layer, and then they can work heavy with their gouache on their subsequent layers. For me, I don't care. I don't really have a problem. Casein is another one. You'll see a YouTuber by the name of James Gurney, who has an awesome website. He uses primarily casein. He used to use gouache, and then when he discovered casein, he never looked back. And he loves casein. Now, casein is a milk-based type of paint that paints like gouache, only it also does not reconstitute. So once it's dried, it stays dry and it looks exactly like gouache, even more so than the acryl gouache does. Casein can only be found, I believe, Jack Richardson is the only company that's making it anymore. It's very old. Well, gouache is very old. It's been around for, oh gosh, for at least 600 years or longer, centuries and centuries. But and it's very much like tempera paint. Tempera paint is a little cheaper and a little chalkier in consistency, and it's wetter, it's waterier than gouache. I think gouache is a little bit nicer, but also you can use gouache over your acrylics. If you paint an acrylic paint, you can use gouache over it, which gives it a really unique look, especially if you want to have a matte and shiny look to your painting. It'll give it some contrast and texture. You can use it over oil paint without any problems. So you can use oil paint over acrylic too, but you can't use acrylic over oil paint. That's a no-no. You'll have a problem with it then. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you all of that, and I think I gave you all the information that I planned on giving you. I had 4 pages here of things that I was sharing. So anyway, I hope that this video was enlightening, that it helped you, and that it piques your interest in gouache. Gouache, just give it a try. Just buy a couple tubes, give it a try, and you will be absolutely surprised. I know there's some of you out there who have bought like the full set of Lucas gouache. I know you're listening out there. You know who I'm talking to, and you've never used them. So open them up and use them. These are great. Use them up. But be careful with your light fastness if you want to keep these. And other than a sketchbook, I have some hanging on my walls, and I have some adhered to cradled panels, birch panels hanging on the wall, and you can tear them out of your sketchbook even. This is an unfinished one. That's just an underpainting that I'm working on. This was one I did the other day that I showed you that I didn't finish. They sit for a while sometimes, and then I come back to them. But Anyway, that's it, everyone. So remember, be courageous, paint with wild abandon, and most of all, be kind to each other. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you aren't already, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Take care, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.